All right. Thanks everybody for joining this episode of Thumos School for Men. We've got Alex Piku here. How you doing this morning, Alex?
I'm doing good.
Good, man. Man, you've got a lot to share. You've got a business that you have going on right now that's a little bit different from the Western style medicine that we've seen, to date, and we'll really want to dig in with you some of these things. But before we get started, what tell us a little bit about yourself, where you are in life right now, and what you're up to.
All right. So yes, my name is Alex Piku. I'm from small town south of here in Raceland, Louisiana, born and raised. And we'll get into all of this, but I basically ended up overseas at some point, traveling and learning Chinese medicine. Chinese medicine is a pretty interesting style of medicine. It is not an allopathic style, meaning it does not look at disease and combat disease. What it essentially does is look at circulation of the body. And the way it operates is it palpates. We palpate the body, determining how the body has changed through the course of it becoming sick, whether it's a fever, whether it's any bacteria. If it causes a fever, the body's going to react the same. You might have certain different criteria that you're looking for, but the patterns are all going to be essentially the same. You may have a fever with no sweat, you have a fever with sweat. And so it doesn't really matter what the actual bacteria that affected the body is, as much as what the ramifications of that bacteria are showing. So when we see the different kinds of symptoms, we are able to treat those symptoms versus treating the actual disease itself. In essence, what that does is it brings the body back into some type of harmonious state and allows the immune system to take care of itself.
Okay, man, that's interesting. You said a lot of things that I'd like to ask and dig into, but
Absolutely, absolutely.
before we get into that piece, how long have you been practicing this?
Mm. So now we're going to get into some of the lifestyle stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I guess we should just go ahead and start and take it back to the beginning a little bit, and I can get into all of this, right? So essentially, born in Raceland, went to a local high school, all that good stuff, and was never really kind of settled in my mind, I guess you could say. Um, was kind of bullied a lot throughout school, and created those, I guess you could call them traumas, right? The biggest thing about me was I always did things my way. Whether it was a internal rebellious nature, however you want to call that, I just kind of never really set well with parameters. If it didn't make sense to me, I usually had to go about it my own way to try to make sense of what was going on. So, uh, growing up in that realms of just being bullied and being kind of rebellious at a young age, I became very much kind of a handful to my parents, right? Had a father who was kind of distant emotionally, had a mother who was overly nurturing. Um, and that sometimes we know can lead to some different mental states, right? So over the course of that time, I ended up becoming pretty much an angry young teenager, which is what happens with a lot of young men who either don't have that guidance of a father or have too much nurturing of a mother. Sometimes they can become rebellious as we start to look to see what a man actually is and how do we become that man and male figure in society. So at a young age, I ended up getting involved in alcohol and drugs around by the age of 13, to be honest. So started down that path, drinking a lot, partying a lot, um, played sports. So I was fairly popular at school and fairly popular amongst people. Uh, Probably not for all the right reasons, but we're growing and we're maturing and trying to figure out our path in life. So angry, young, violent, drugs, all those things are a pretty good concoction for a lot of problems. Graduating high school, going off into the workforce, none of these things, because I had this internal nature of rebellion, none of these things actually settled within me. It always seemed like I needed more, and I was searching for more, and was out in the world looking for the better and bigger. And I don't necessarily mean better and bigger as in saying I needed the big money or the big this, but always was searching for something internally because there was something that was never being fulfilled. So we get to about the age of 25. At this point, I have pretty much been to all the parties, done all the things, in a bad, chaotic state of being, and just fit to be tied, I guess you could call it. Ended up getting to a place where I was getting married. Got married and ended up finding out my wife was cheating on me. With all that was going on internally, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, that was just a pretty much a good swift kick over the edge. And I ended up finding myself outside of a gentleman's house who my wife was messing with, um, contemplating whether it was going to be killing somebody or killing myself, or just the chaos in the whirlwind was just not in a good place. And something, I call it divine intervention, something grabbed a hold and just said, hey, take a sit and calm down, relax, look at what you're doing and try to figure out something inside of your world. I stopped what I was doing, got in my vehicle and left, and then ended up pretty much just reaching out to, whether you call it God, some spiritual consciousness, whatever the word is that you're looking for. I reached out to it and said, this is the situation I'm in. I've already at 25 have experienced the deepest, darkest parts of what I consider to be hell. Either this needs to change or I am checking out. I'm done. I can't take this anymore. It was too much. It was the years of just abuse from friends, being bullied throughout school, going through the drugs, the alcohol, ending up at the bottom of every barrel that I could find. And it just didn't seem like this made a whole lot of sense. Approximately a couple weeks later, I had a friend living out in Las Vegas. And asked me, hey, Alex, you want to come take a ride out here and just kind of settle your mind? I said, that might be the best thing I need. So I flew out to Vegas, and at that moment was offered a position with a real estate firm. I said, you know what, whether this works out or not, this could be my way out of all of this mess. So I left, moved to Las Vegas. Now, most people would probably say, at this moment in my life, between the drugs, the alcohol, the partying, Las Vegas may not be the best place for me, right? Leaving the New Orleans scene and the South Louisiana scene, that may not be ultimately a good move. The thing is, though, as the world works, I ended up becoming friends with a bunch of guys who were rock climbers, and ended up spending a lot of time out in the mountains. And being a Bayou boy who had never seen a mountain before, I thought they were pretty spectacular and was in awe of that visual, that scenery. So I took every opportunity I could to spend my time out there, and pretty much found a pretty good sense of like calmness being out there and being on the side of a cliff.
How old were you at this time?
Was that
How old were you at this time?
25? I had just
Okay,
turned about, I had just
okay.
turned 25. I had just gotten divorced, and it was pretty much like I said, it was either this move or no telling what was the next move I had in my pocket.
Okay.
Um, Being out there, I was climbing with a gentleman who was also worked with me, and he had ended up meeting a young lady and started dating her. And anytime we start dating women, a lot of times our friends and different things can get kind of put to the side, right? So what ended up happening is I would just go to the gym and climb on my own. And one day I ran into a young lady who was in there who was, I didn't know her, I didn't know of her much. I just knew she was a pro climber and she was sponsored by some different companies. So she one day approached me and said, "Hey, I've been seeing you in here climbing. Would you, my partner doesn't climb with me anymore. He moved out of state. Would you be interested in climbing together?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course. You could teach me some stuff. And I need to get to know more people around here." So I started climbing with her. And one of the first things she did was tell me, "You're very strong. However, one thing that could probably help you with this would be yoga." And at that time, for me, coming from the bayou and just having this stigma of yoga, I said, "Yeah, there's no way. There's no way you're going to pull me into a yoga class." I said, "One, it's for chicks and guys who are not into chicks." So I said, "I'm not doing this." And you know how women are, they're very good at it. Over a period of time, she talked me into going to a yoga class. So she convinced me to go into this class, and I went in very reluctant. But once I got in there and finished up the class, this is what I'm going to say. It was the first time in my existence that I had found a true sense of what I would call peace and calmness. I had never felt this before. I didn't know what it was or how it happened. I just knew that out of all the drugs and all the alcohol and all the parties and all the running and all the this and that, I can never find anything that I could consider to be peaceful. This was the first time. So I immediately went home and just started Googling and reading and searching and said, "What is yoga? What does it do? What is it? How does it work?" I don't know anything about it. It just seemed like it was some stretching that women did from my very simplistic mind perspective. And what I came across was some pretty vast knowledge. Some knowledge that probably dated back to anything I had studied up to that point before. And it kind of just took me into a big time rabbit hole of philosophy, understandings, um, realizing that all these different ancient cultures seem to have spoke some kind of similar language that was in some way lost. Um, and I ended up realizing that yoga was kind of a system of like, how do you take care of your physical body? How do you take care of your mental body? How do you take care of your spiritual body? How do you have proper hygiene? Why are all these things even important to begin with? And so I went on I mean, I've been doing yoga now for 20 years and just went into a deep hole of, hey, you know what? I have an understanding of I'm an addict. So we know that if you're an addict, that is not something that you get rid of. You're not an addict one day and then all of a sudden you're not an addict. What addicts do is we change substances. So yes, the darker, deeper, more detrimental substances found me in my earlier life. And now it seemed like it was the more beneficial substances that were getting ready to approach me in my next phase of my life, if that makes any sense.
It sure does. So you found this yoga at right around the age of 25 ish, so
Yep.
to speak. And at that time, were you still consume? I mean, were you doing when you moved to Vegas? Were you still doing drugs and alcohol?
Oh, yeah, pretty heavily. I
Okay,
like, I did, so I drank a lot because, alcohol is legal. And alcohol in our culture down in the bayou is very prevalent. So I drank a lot, but alcohol for me opened up doorways to everything else that was available. So if somebody had pills, if somebody had cocaine, it just really didn't matter at that moment. It was kind of one of those things where the alcohol would open the door for me to have the inhibition to do whatever else I was around and available. And essentially I was running. So when you're running from something, the further you can run, the harder you can run tends to be the better option at that moment.
And did you see yourself as an addict at that time?
No, not at all.
Okay.
I just looked at myself as being an average guy on the bayou that liked to drink on the weekends. It wasn't until I started having some deeper insight that I realized that there's different forms of alcoholism. I wasn't the alcoholic that drank every day. I was the alcoholic that on Friday, when I got off of work, would stay pretty much drunk Friday, Saturday, Sunday until it was time to go back to work on Monday.
And so you start the yoga while you're still at this point an addict.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
and so did was there a point that the yoga took over and the addiction to alcohol and drugs stopped, or
Hmm.
did it phase out, or how did that work?
Yes. However, yoga and working on the mind is not a let me take a magic pill and I'm done. It's a slow progression. But one of the best things for addicts is discipline. If you can take an addict and you can change their direction and give them some form of discipline, typically you can take an addict and they typically can become a very powerful individual. They so one of the things, let me back up a little bit. Not same time frame. I'm in Vegas. One of the things that I did was I ended up getting involved in a self-help organization called PSI Seminars, PSI Seminars. Now, I don't know if you've heard of PSI Seminars, but they are primarily the largest independent seminar organization on the planet. They probably have anywhere between a half to three quarters of a million graduates. And they kind of, between that and dedicating myself to the practice of yoga, kind of helped me to see and reflect upon the things and the behaviors that I was doing, and kind of made me really like take a step back a little bit. Now, granted, it took a long time, and we'll get into those progressive stages, but it took a long time for me to shift that mindset fully from being an addict, because I didn't know I was one, into the stages where now there's no substances that enter my body outside of my consistent tea drinking. um, but Sci Seminars has a pretty interesting program where they um, put you through some different stages, steps, and I'm sure that Thumos and a few of these other programs do similar things, which allow you to become aware of the actions of how you behave on a regular basis, whether it's actions of how you behave upon yourself. Maybe it's debilitating talk. Maybe it's I don't like myself. Maybe I'm beating myself down when I don't complete a task. Those types of things can be detrimental. But it's also how am I behaving with others? Because those can also be just as detrimental as how am I behaving with my fellow man? How am I behaving with my fellow woman? How am I behaving towards my children? How am I behaving towards animals, towards my society? All those things become our immediate environment. It's not just ourselves, it's everything that surrounds us. How do we affect others correlates directly upon how everything becomes affected. I guess you can
And
call that the karmic concept. That what it is that I put out also is that what it is I get back.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And your journey, from based on what you're saying, I've heard people who are addicts, and usually they hit some kind of rock bottom. Like
Mm.
that's what you hear quite often is you hit this rock bottom, and then that's kind of is the trigger or catalyst for the change. And with you, it doesn't seem to be the case. It seems like you started to introduce. Did you have a rock bottom?
I'd say ending up in a closet at my old house in Louisiana with a gun in my mouth would seem like rock bottom. When I
Ah,
when
okay.
I, when I say I'm calling out to the powers that be and say either I need out or I'm checking out. And that's how it was. It was me staring at the end of a barrel going, either I'm out of here or I need change, and I need major change, drastic internal change.
So your rock bottom was in Louisiana,
Absolutely.
and so when you moved, that was your change and taking the action to start improving your life.
No doubt.
Mm. And so you go over to Vegas, and now you get into this PSI. How long were you involved with them?
Probably for about a year and a half. I did they have multiple courses. They have the first course is the basic seminar. You go through a basic understanding. It's a 3-day weekend of just some self-reflection and how you're behaving with other people and different things. Then you go into the size 7, which is a 7-day retreat out in Northern California with probably like 200 people, a mixture of men and women. And you're going through different scenarios. How am I behaving with all this big group of people? Then I ended up doing the next phase of the seminars, which is MLS, which is men's leadership, which brings you into the same ranch with approximately 100 something, 200 men of how do I behave within a group of just all men? Where do I stand? Do I stand up for myself? Do I cower amongst somebody who I'm intimidated by? Do I get angry? Do I look at this individual as being more of a father figure because maybe I didn't have that father figure in my life? And they just put you into these scenarios, or some of it is just not even them putting in the scenarios as much as they put you in the environment, and your own construct get involved in the scenarios that you're naturally going to attract.
And so as you progress through this, do you feel like that was your healing? Is that when you finished up with PSI? Were you
I think it was a portion of healing. I think that was a big catalyst. I think it was a start. I think it helped me to reflect and gave me some tools to reflect upon myself. I think keeping up the discipline of doing yoga every morning from that point and meditating. When I was young, I always heard that yoga and meditation was like some evil stuff for bad people. And it didn't take me very long to realize that meditation, when you go to the gym, you work out your muscles, but very seldom do we actually train the mind. And it didn't take me long reading some of the books that I was starting to read now, which I wasn't a big reader and still aren't, but the more that I'm into this world of Chinese medicine and different things, the more I'm forced to break those boundaries of not being a great reader and actually encumbering that information. Um, One of the things that I through that reading made me start to understand was that when you're sitting in meditation, that you're not allowing the mind to wander freely, that you're actually sitting there with pure intention of understanding how the mind wants to wander without your consent. Let's say that. They say we have two different paradigms in the brain. We have this voice tape recorder that's in the back of the brain that doesn't stop running. And we have the frontal part that tends to be your own authentic thoughts. Well, when you learn to train the brain to sit in the frontal part of the mind, having authentic thoughts, that typically brings you more peace because the brain itself likes to get focused on these stories that it'll start down these tangents of maybe I'm gonna, I'm going to work today. I might get in a wreck. Oh my God, I'm gonna have anxiety about going to work today now. Well, is that really a reality? Maybe, but on the flip side of that, maybe not. For every time you think that I could get in a wreck, you should also be able to think that there's a chance that I won't get into a wreck. So when you get off into these tangents and allowing the mind to control you, you start to realize, well, where do these mechanisms come from? And through reading and studying, I've learned that they come from about the age of 0 to 7, when your brain pretty much hardwires itself, which we call the ego, hardwires itself into all the things, the traumas and all the things that's happened to you up until around that age 7, some say 10, but primarily in that adolescent stage. It seems that what we do is, as human beings, is from 0 to that adolescent stage, we're recording information. Then from that adolescent stage on to the maybe around the 30s, we're trying to implement that information that we've acquired. Then when we get to the older stages, the 30s on up, we typically know what works and what doesn't work. And now it should be a little easier in navigating our existence. I'm not saying everybody has that ability. Some people tend to get messed up on drugs longer than me. Some people are still on alcohol longer than me. Some people don't have that opportunity till later in life. But from reading some of these different psychology books and some of the books that I've read when it comes down to like Buddhism, and which in my opinion, Buddhism understands the mind on a pretty significant deep level. It seems that the way the mind works is in these different phases. You learn, you obtain the knowledge, you utilize the knowledge, and then you learn and understand what works and what doesn't work within that knowledge and that frame.
And so it sounds to me like you've sort of been practicing meditation, and what you describe, you're becoming more aware of those thoughts that float around.
Correct.
Um,
More aware of what we call the ego and how it affects everyday life.
mm,
Meaning, let's say my whole life I seen my dad, we're driving down the road, somebody cuts him off, and I see my dad flipping him off out the window. Naturally, that is going to be an ingrained trait in my brain that I'm going to probably end up doing the exact same thing. Is it beneficial? It's one of those things to look into. It's called self-reflection, introspection, right? So at the moment that you start realizing that these are my programs, some are beneficial and some may not be beneficial. How do you unwire and change those internal programs? Meditation is probably the most powerful way that I have found in order to change those internal programs. Reflecting, sitting there, understanding, going through the situation. Okay, my dad stuck it, and I'm not saying my dad actually did that. I'm just saying in general, right? Which he may
yeah,
have, I don't
yeah.
really remember. But essentially, just going through those programs of saying, is that really beneficial? Okay, let's look at the karmic and the Buddhist philosophy, how they would say, well, okay, what happens if you flip this guy off, he turns around, pulls you over and shoots you? Was it really beneficial? Could you have just gone, that guy's having a bad day, he might have not even seen me. Maybe my horn set him off. All these different ways to look at things, because at the end of the day, everything's about perspective. So if I look at something from a very singular perspective manner, is that from a program that I have obtained from that 0 to early childhood age? A lot of times it is the case. So when you learn to deprogram or unwire through the deep introspection in the meditation, those programs tend to become better. So now I notice maybe you don't attract those people that cut you off as much anymore, because maybe that's not a lesson or a program that you're attracting anymore. Because what we put out there, we typically attract back. If I'm angry, I'm going to attract angry people, because it's a self reflection of my internal self. If I'm at peace, I'll attract more people at peace, which typically becomes a more self reflection of what I'm attempting to acquire.
So, I mean, everything you're saying, thank you for all this, because you're covering a lot of ground
Wow.
here with not only your life, but just philosophy. And I know there's quite a few people in Thumos that have studied the law of attraction, and you describe it well. Um, it, let me ask you this on the career side. So when you go out to Vegas, just making money, your job. You described what you were doing on the side, but what were you finding yourself doing for to actually make money to make a living? And were you combining, or were you thinking at that time that you wanted to make a living and correlate what your passion is with this meditation that you were getting into with yoga and what you were learning from PSI? I'm curious to see how that was correlating, making money versus the things that you were learning about yourself as you were growing.
Mm-hmm. So I spent about 2 years in Vegas, and I was in land development. I was working for a land development company. Basically, we would buy up properties, large pieces of property. We'd subdivide those and sell those pieces of property off to land developers, or maybe this piece was commercial, this piece was residential, stuff like that. I left Louisiana. Here's a little divine intervention for you, right? I left Louisiana 2 hours before the mandatory evacuation for Hurricane Katrina. So when I was in Lafayette, which is about 2 hours from Graceland, and heard on the radio, which I was listening to radio at that time because we don't, the radios was still working back in them days. I remember hearing them say mandatory evacuation for South Louisiana. So I called my parents up, and they were stuck in traffic. And I had literally just left right before the mandatory evacuation scheduled trip to drive with my U-Haul loaded down all the way to Las Vegas. So I say that's a pretty good little indication that I was meant for me to be on that journey. About 2 years later, the market was crashing. As we all know, the real estate market got really bad in this country around that time. That was like 2006, 7, somewhere in that area. So I did what any good young, say young, but I was 20, 26, 27 at the time, good young mama's boy would do. And I took off right back to Louisiana to the bayou. And I went offshore actually. I figured if I built up my money enough, I could always go back. But right now, money was tight. I needed something, and I had attempted to find some work out there. But due to my ego and my pride, I wasn't willing to do just whatever kind of work. I had an associates in engineering. I had previously worked for a lift boat company as an engineer. So I wasn't really interested in being a grunt. Pride, ego, know where it gets you.
Sure.
So I took off back to Louisiana and went offshore and spent about 8.5 years working offshore and on a production facility. And in that 8.5 years, had become the top production operator, A-class operator for the largest independent oil company in the Gulf of Mexico on the shelf at that time, EPL, which was had just bought out Heel Corp out of Texas. So I was making extremely good money. I think my last bonus was like $30,000. So I mean, for uh, young single man. I had just built a house, paid all my truck, paid everything off, was living the comfortable life and had the money. But like I told you in the beginning, I had an internal fire that just was very, very hard to quench. And one day I was sitting in my house, and at that time I was still drinking heavily. I was still doing yoga though, to the point where I would bring my yoga mat offshore. A guy being probably the only guy on the whole in the Gulf of Mexico bringing the yoga mat offshore, the kind of word, the I guess the
Yeah.
language that I've heard.
I was going to say, I was wondering how that would be received going
Not
offshore with the
very
yoga mat.
easily. But that's part of strengthening the mind. It's like I always tell people, you want to see a strong-minded individual, whether you agree with anything he's ever written. In my opinion, Stephen Hawking was one of the strongest minded human beings to ever step foot on the planet. I know we like to think of strength as being, 300 pounds of big, broad muscle can lift a house. But those guys are not running the world right now. And an individual like Stephen Hawking came to a point in his life where he knew, I'm going to be stuck in this wheelchair for the rest of my life, no matter what that looks like. And the majority of people, I don't think, could handle that concept. I think the majority of people would probably kill themselves before they would spend another 30, 40 years sitting in a wheelchair, not being able to move as a vegetable. That individual had to cross that road. And he crossed that road and said, I'm going to stay in this chair and I'm going to write books and I'm going to explore the mind. That's a powerful mind right there, no matter how you look at
Indeed.
it.
Yes, indeed. Absolutely.
So when you strengthen the mind, you start to realize that other people's opinions of you, they don't really much matter anymore. The only opinion of me that matters is that of myself. So yoga, sitting in meditation, strengthening my mind, I came to that realization on the platforms that as much as I was having that comfortable life, I felt like the industry was taking my soul. I was watching people. Now, look, I'm not going to sit here and say I'm the biggest hippie running around, hugging trees, all that stuff. Let's hold hands and sing kumbaya. But at the end of the day, growing up hunting, my dad always taught me, hey, listen, whatever we take into the woods, we take out the woods. This is the land that provides for us. We went duck hunting, we shot shells. The shells that were in the water, we took them out and we put them in the boat and we went home and we threw them in the garbage. So watching individuals on a regular basis throwing stuff overboard, dumping oil, dumping chemicals, and going, I don't give a shit about that, just didn't sit well with me. It just ate me alive. And after about 8.5 years, I one day, I was sitting in I had my own little yoga room at my house. I just finished my yoga practice and I was sitting there going, what am I doing here? I've got this house, I've got this job, I'm comfortable, but I'm not internally fulfilled. I need something more than whatever it is that's going on right here. So, as the universe has it, when you put them words out to the universe of I need more, I need change, I need something's not sitting well within me, you got to be careful what you ask for. So I ended up meeting a girl who had just finished, little hippie girl who had just finished traveling Thailand. And she had just finished getting her yoga teacher training certification. And we were hanging out at my house and she was showing me these pictures. And I said, that's what I want that.
And this is Thailand, pictures of Thailand.
Yeah. Thailand and just travels, like experiencing the world, knowing that there was more out there than just being on the bayou. I had already spent time in Vegas and California and traveling that whole big corridor and realized that they had so much more of a vast um, stuff out there that I knew it wasn't just this little bayou that I had grown up on. So I ended up pulling off one of the craziest things. Everybody had told me I was the craziest individual ever and blah, blah, blah. But I basically sold all my possessions except my truck, put it in storage, put a bunch of my stuff in storage, sold my house, quit my hundred whatever $1,000 a year job and said, I'm out of here. I loaded up a few backpacks and I started backpacking in Malaysia, went to Thailand, India, China, and just said, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going into the world. I'm going to figure everything out.
And this is by yourself?
Yeah, this is by myself.
Wow. Man, that's a very bold move right there.
Like I said, man, internal fire and make you do some crazy stuff. This inability to play by the rules of me going even from very young, I often joke with my mother. She'd tell me stories about even at like 1 year old when my grandmother was trying to dress me in an outfit that I really didn't like, I would be hollering and fussing with her like I'm not wearing that. And it was like even from the moment I was born, there was just an internal fire that said, I'm not okay with these typical paradigms. I need more. I need to do more. I want more. And so it was as much as it was I'm not gonna say a no-brainer. There was some anxiety that I had never felt before. There was a lot going on. It's easy to jump, but sometimes during that fall, you kind of can get that second mindset of, am I really? Is there anything down there? I mean, am I really doing this? This is complete insanity.
Did you get that feeling when you left in your first spot? So you sold all your stuff. I'm sure there had to be something when you talk about the front of your brain and the back of your brain. There had to be some kind of voice that was saying, "Hey, you're crazy for doing this."
Oh
Was there
man,
any? Was there anything when you first landed, in the East?
oh, it
Was
happened
it
before that. It
okay?
happened
All right.
before that. My plan was my little friend, she was going to be going to she was leaving Louisiana. She was going to California and Portland area. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to go up to Portland and I'm going to travel with her from Portland down to Northern California for about a week or two, and then we was gonna be splitting off, and I was heading overseas because it was right around New Year. I had just quit right when I got after my Christmas bonus. So um, here I am in Portland, Oregon. Now I understand I'm still doing drugs and alcohol at this time. The yoga is shifting my environment. The meditation is shifting my environment, but it's not shifting me internally yet. So we go out to this, I guess you could call it a rave. It was a big party in Oregon, and I liked smoking cannabis at the time. But they weren't smoking, they were eating these edibles. And I don't know if a lot of people know about edibles. Sometimes they hit you a little bit different than smoking a little cannabis. So I ended up eating this cookie, and we're out dancing, having a good time. And all of a sudden, like a big just wave of something hit me, and I just hit the floor and was like, what am I doing? I have got to have lost my mind. There's no way about it. I have lost my mind. And I couldn't find my party. I didn't know where anybody was at. I was in Oregon. I was now on a high of insanity, and I've got anxiety out the butt, right? So I ended up going find the little paramedics station, told them what was going on. They sat me down, gave me some water, some. They actually went get me a sandwich, so I was able to eat and kind of calm down a little bit. And it was the first time I don't, I'm not too big into all these little hippie crazy. Sometimes I think some of this stuff that these hippies do are crazy, but at the same time, as much as they're crazy, sometimes some of these things will speak to you at the moment you need them to make you go, maybe they're crazy, or maybe I just don't know enough to be able to make that assumption. So some girl out of the blue approaches me and says, "Hey, do you mind if I do a tarot card reading on you?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm already in the realms of you out of your mind." So I said, "You know what? I can't go anywhere as I could barely walk right now. I'm kind of like shaking. I'm gonna sit here and I don't really care what you do. I don't know you, but I'm just sitting here." So this girl goes through these cards and she flips these cards and says, "You're getting ready to go on a big journey." And I mean, basically starts telling me everything that's going on. She says, "You're getting ready to leave the country. You don't know what you're," and I'm like, whoa, slow down. Like now you're freaking me out. I'm already freaked out because of what I've done. Now you're starting to freak me out. So I usually sometimes take it as sometimes you just need that information when it's pertinent, whether it comes from God, whether it comes from whatever. Sometimes information comes your way when it's needed. So through that little experience, I was able to calm down, regather myself, and go, everything is going to be all right. I need to continue down this path because in some ways I asked for it. So me and this girl, we traveled down to Northern California, and she drops me off at the airport and I fly out. At the time, my brother-in-law and my sister were living in Malaysia. So it made perfect sense. I hadn't seen them in a while. For me to stop in Malaysia and say hey and kind of get my bearings straight of how to travel in a foreign country. So I did. I landed in Malaysia. My brother-in-law picked me up from the airport, and I spent about 2 weeks of just hanging out with family. And then it was time to say goodbye and start on my journey. And I ended up heading to Thailand because I had set up the yoga teacher training in Thailand. I was going to get certified to teach yoga. And then after that, I didn't have any plans. I was kind of like, get certified to teach yoga and just go see what's going to happen after that.
Did you as you yeah, I was going to ask it, your future plans when you landed in Malaysia. I mean, were you thinking this was going to be an excursion for a year, 2 years, 6 months? Did you have a duration in your mind of sort of a length?
I did all for life.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I wasn't planning on coming back.
Ah, so this was you leaving in your mind for good.
No doubt. I had left after selling my house and selling all my possessions and the bonus check. I probably left with close to 100 grand in my account. Going overseas with that kind of money, I was like, I'll figure it out. I ain't worried about work. I ain't worried about anything. I got time to go and explore and see what I'm going to do with myself. And in all actuality, I didn't really plan on coming back to the States because not at that moment, it's not because I had anything against America. I just didn't feel like internally this was the place that I wanted to be. I had so much trauma, so many things. I didn't have a lot of friends that are people that I really, let's not say I didn't have friends. I didn't have what we would consider friends, where people who were like, hey man, let's go get together. Let's do it was more like drinking buddies. Like once I stopped drinking and really got off all the alcohol and drugs, I really lost in touch with all those people because it's the concept of, if you can't put a heroin addict back into a crack house because they're gonna do drugs again. You got to remove yourself completely from that environment. So once I removed myself from that environment, I hadn't really had a bunch of real deep friendships to begin with. So my attitude was like, I'm kind of done with this. I'm going overseas and I probably won't be back. I love my family, but there's enough traumas between me and my family and my siblings that, and look, years later now, me and my family have great relationships. But growing up, because of who I was and because of things that happened to me, whether it was from, lack of affection from my dad, over nurturing and coddling from my mom, whether it was friends stabbing me in the back, or whatever the traumas were, being bullied as a kid, I had just had enough going on internally that I felt like I didn't need to come back here ever. I was like, hey, I'm set on a different path. I got money. I can figure out. I've always been a hard worker. There's not a single person on the planet that'll tell you, oh, he's lazy. My dad taught me as a young man to work hard. So I was like, I'll make it somewhere. I'm not worried. I got a big enough nest egg. I don't gotta go back.
And how old were you when you did this trip to Malaysia?
Cool, man. Let's see, 25 in Vegas, and add about 8, 9 years, almost 10. You could say I was probably 36, 37, somewhere's around there.
Wow. So at that age, leaving the country, yeah, that's a bold move, man.
Yeah, because most people at that age are really trying to like build their, what you would call an empire, right? Really trying to build themselves up. And look, at the end of the day, I've come to terms with the fact that some of the things that I've acquired, money can't buy. So if I died right now, not ever having built this quote unquote empire, I still die at peace and I'm happy. So most people in this planet right now can die broke and never have that, and can die rich and never have that.
Mm.
So you ask the majority of people, would you take millions of dollars or do you want to be happy? And in the short term, they may say, I'll take the money, but that's because they only think that that can buy them the happiness. But every ancient philosophy, every ancient sage, whether it's Jesus, Buddha, Sadhguru, doesn't matter what sage you ask, they'll laugh at you and go, you'll never find peace and happiness with money because you can't buy it. It takes cultivation and work and discipline.
Well, that's a great segue into what you learned while you were out there. What so you travel, you leave your sister after 2 weeks. Tell me about the next piece of your journey.
So the next stage is landing in Thailand. I ended up in Bangkok, and this was the first time I had a culture shock. A culture shock in the sense of where I felt like I had been lied to on a pretty drastic stage in my life. I was told by my family, by my brother-in-law, he was in the Marine Corps, and he said, "Listen, you're going to Thailand, you're going to Bangkok. There's some protests going on right now over there, very violent. I want you to stay away from that stuff." I said, "Hey, man, I'm not going over. Don't get me wrong. Listen, my whole entire life up until this point is pretty tainted. So me attracting chaos is pretty easily can say, hey, dude, like I'm telling you to stay out of that area because you can typically attract a little chaos in your life." So I'm like, hey, man, I'm just going travel, trying to see the world, trying to find myself, right? Trying to figure out where I belong in the stage of this game. So I get to the airport, driver picks me up. I don't speak Thai. I give him the information, the address. I'm like, hope, praying that this guy's going to get me where I need to go and I'm not going to end up dead and blah, 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 in a dumpster somewhere. I had family members crying, oh, you're going to end up in a dumpster. And I'm like, God, man, why is this like the most detrimental thing? Like, I might have a really good experience. I don't know, but I'm going to go find out. So I end up getting dropped off. The guy parks at this place and he says, it's down here. He just points. And I'm like, oh, shit. So I get out the car and I'm walking and I noticed this big metal, like my parents kind of have one set up for their camper. It's like a big metal shelter where you could park stuff underneath, right? But this thing's like massive, like military grade. And there's tents lined up and everything's barricaded off. And there's food vendors everywhere. So I'm like, oh, this is a cool little market. So I walk through, find my little hostel, and spent about a week or two traveling, checking out Bangkok, going to all the little like memorials, the temples. Now, at that time, let me back up for 1 second. At that time, I had already been studying philosophy, right? I was raised Catholic, but felt like I needed more information. Not saying that I didn't believe in anything Catholicism had to say, just saying that I needed more and felt like there might be more information out there after have studying certain things and realizing that there was some ancient knowledge that was being spoken, some ancient languages that were being spoken prior to with the timeline of Catholicism. So I got into Hinduism because people think yoga and Hinduism are the same. They're not. They form the same timeline, but they're not the same. Not every Hindu does yoga. Yoga is a system of more or less working on yourself and all these different aspects. Then I got into, I studied some of the Quran. I studied some of I found Buddhism to be pretty deep when it came down to the mind and the way things worked. And so my attitude was, I'm going to go into all these little Buddhist temples and I'm just going to speak to the monks if I can find any that speak English and see if I can get their take on some things. So I did that for about 2 weeks. And then I ended up making my way down towards South Thailand to the island where the yoga retreat was going to happen. It was like almost 3 months of teacher training. I got onto the island and sat in a French bakery, which was the first restaurant that right when you get off the island, there's a bakery. So I'm hungry. It's early in the morning. Got off the ferry, go into this bakery, and lo and behold, there's the news, Western news, and they're talking about the violent protest that's going on, and they're showing the place that I have been walking through for 2 weeks. And I went, that's the protest? I said, that's not a protest. I said, all those people, they had food carts and food vendors. They had people out there that were sleeping in tents. Like, I'm not talking about a tent. I'm talking probably like 300-400 tents, all covered by the government, barricading roads off so that people could protest peacefully. And it slapped me in the face, and I went, am I being lied to? I said, there's a lot of stuff that I don't know in this world. And what I don't know, one thing that I do know is that when you're raised inside of a box, there's no way you know what's going on outside of the box. The only things that you know going on outside of the box are what the people inside of the box are telling you happening outside of the box. Now that my box has broadened, is what's going on and what I'm being told inside the box reality? That's a big pill to swallow.
That's a very big one to swallow. Yeah, I mean, what you're describing about what we see on media, and what we think is truth, that's a big pill to swallow for sure. So you see this, and how does this change? Does this change the trajectory of what you're thinking and what your next move is?
It doesn't change the move. What it did was it made me become very aware of what was happening in my own country, because I now had a little bit of a bitter taste in my mouth. And there was some anger coming up because I was red, white, and blue, bleed till I die. And now I'm sitting here going, if I'm being lied to, I ain't gonna be a happy camper. Because there's one thing I don't like is a liar. So I put that on the back burner and I go and check out this island in Thailand. And I spent about 2 weeks just hanging out in these little bungalows on the beaches, just finding my little hole in the wall bars that I would sneak into, still drinking, still smoking. At this time, I stopped doing some of the harder drugs. I stopped. The biggest things that I did a lot of was painkillers. If you're in pain, a lot of times you're going to do a lot of painkillers, right? So I used to drink a lot and then shove pills down my throat. Well, the pills now have have gone away. I'm not doing that anymore. My taste for alcohol has shifted from drinking whiskey a lot to just sticking to beer. And I never was a Bud Light, Budweiser, that I can't even remember the name of it. It's been so long since I drank, but you know that the kind of beers that we're used to drinking in America, that more
Sure.
yellow. I really always did like Guinness. So I started drinking a lot of Guinness, which is a heavier beer, which is going to fill me faster. So my taste buds are starting to change for different types of alcohol. So in some ways, internally, that shift is starting to happen. But I'm still smoking a lot of cannabis. Now, I do believe in plant medicines. I've done a lot of ceremonies with some of these master plants, but I also believe that nothing done every day is beneficial to anyone. I don't care what it is. You shouldn't drink coffee every single day. You should have control over how much caffeine your body intakes on a regular basis. So if you can control how much caffeine is coming inside of you, you should also be controlling how much cannabis is coming inside of you, how many cigarettes you're taking in a day. You should be in control of your existence at all times. So I find the bars that I'm going into now are um not so much the frat house bars. They're more in lines of like um the Rasta bars. Now I can go sit down in these little countries and these little hole in the wall places and smoke a little bit and just kind of relax and chill out, listen to some reggae music. Um, Reggae and Bob Marley and that whole genre of music had really been an eye opener up for me as a young man. It had really I connected really deeply on a spiritual level with that music. So that had always been prevalent, but I didn't know how to implement any of those teachings. It just was something that resonated deep down inside for me. So 2 weeks of doing that, and then I go off to my teacher training. I The teacher training was about 3 months, roughly, a little bit shorter than 3 months. And it was pretty intense, pretty grueling. It's yoga in the morning when you wake up, yoga during the middle of the day, and yoga in the evening.
Do
So
you, do you happen to know if that's a common? I mean, 3 months of training to be a yoga instructor, is that common across the world, or is this like the pinnacle of places to go do this training? Or are you aware of that? Because
yeah,
that seems like a very long time, very intense.
yes and no.
Like, do people
If you
travel
go,
to this location to
if you
do this?
go to a location to get your teacher training, it's typically approximately 2.5 to 3 months. depending on the teacher, depending on the course. Um, it may also be the same in the sense of done locally, but the way it's broken up differently. Because you see, now I'm at the retreat at the school, they can have you every day. Where if somebody is in the States and they're getting trained while they go to school and while they go to work or whatever, that there might only be able to meet up on the weekends. So it'll look differently, right?
Okay.
But the duration is probably similar. I mean, whether the body, there is no governing body of yoga. They're attempting to do that, but there's no major governing body of yoga, because yoga is really done as a self practice. That's why you get all these different variations of like, the goat yoga and the dog yoga and all these other things, because there's no governing body that says, hey, this is what yoga is. It's a system. And I'm not going to get into anything because everybody finds their own path, but I'm not a fan of all of those different types of yoga because you lose out on the system. You can't focus consciously on the system that is presented at hand, the self-discipline that it takes to grow into a practice when you got your dog messing with you or you got your goat standing on your back. It doesn't work that way. So it does take a pretty extensive amount of time to obtain the knowledge, though, because not only are you obtaining knowledge about the yoga poses, but you're also learning some Sanskrit language. You're also learning some history. You're also learning some anatomy. So all of these things become a combination to create this class. And that's a lot of knowledge. And so in my opinion, going to a destination and having the ability to focus just solely on that is probably the most beneficial way to become a yoga instructor.
And so this is fully immersive. You're in it. You're in it for 3 months.
No doubt. No doubt about it. 3 months
Okay.
of
So,
fun.
wow. So you completed this 3 month journey, and
Yeah, we're gonna back up into the journey though. So into this journey, approximately I'd say 3 weeks in, it started getting tough. Tough in the sense of you have to understand me at this school was the only straight single male amongst probably 4 guys that were married, probably 3 guys that were gay, and about 30 probably pretty attractive women. And one of the first things that's told to you at that moment is, hey guys, look, we understand that when you're doing this and you're surrounded by all these people, sometimes things can happen. We want to try to refrain from sleeping with anybody in the class because it can become kind of, things can get clouded. I said, you know what, that's valid. That makes a lot of sense because, man, once you start having relationships within the dynamic of the structured class, it can be a little bit, your mind's maybe not focused on here. Well, I don't know if you know a lot about hippie girls, but hippie girls typically don't like to wear a lot of clothing. And being on a secluded private beach, they don't like to wear any clothing. So that becomes a very, very difficult situation for a young, I say young, but a straight male. So it became quite intense for a minute. And about week 3, I ended up being out it was my birthday actually. And I ended up saying, you know what, it's my birthday. I'm going to get myself a treat, a little piece of there was this place that made natural chocolate. And I'm gonna go get me a bar of chocolate. It's really awesome. I'm gonna go here and then I'm gonna head back to the retreat center. Well, I go there and there's this girl working there, and she's only working there on Sundays, and it was on a Sunday. So just so happens she was from New Orleans. Go figure, more divine intervention, right?
Wow.
So yeah, wow. So basically, after she got off work, I spent the rest of the day and evening at her place. And I said, this is actually a good thing because this is going to help me be able to focus on school when school's here, and I can mess with the girl outside of school. So that took place. Went through the yoga course, and after the course was over, I decided to hang out with her for a couple of weeks. And during, okay, so let me back up a little bit. During the course, I don't know how this even happened. About almost a done, and like you got to figure if it's a 3-month course and you're almost in a month, like it's tough to have a new student come into any course, right? Well, they just so happened there was a girl that had signed up, but she couldn't get into the class because of visa and all these different things, but she was on her way. She was from China. Well, she came to the class, and one day I was talking with her and the chiropractor. We had a chiropractor guy who was a longtime yoga guy and who had a very similar story to to me, like addict, him and his brother, a lot of fighting, a lot of this, a lot of that, da da da, all these different things. And it seemed like, man, we really connected because he had a lot of the same story as me. Um, well, his wife at the time wasn't on the island. She was on her way. And so I hung out a lot with him. So me, him, and this Chinese girl were talking one day in class. I didn't know anything about Chinese medicine. I just knew that I was really, from a very, very young age, obsessed with martial arts. I had done some jujitsu. I had done some kickboxing. I had been a massive fan and still am a massive fan of Bruce Lee. I've watched all the movies, still introduce my son to Bruce Lee videos now and movies, and we watch them, and um, he plays like he's got nunchucks and all this stuff, right? And so one day they asked me the same question you asked. What's next for you after this? I said, I think I want to head to Japan. And they said, why Japan? I said, because I think I want to learn acupuncture. Now, look, I don't even know where that came from because I only remember really seeing acupuncture maybe in like movies or something like that. Like I didn't really have a understanding of what acupuncture even was. And they looked at me and said, that's not Japanese, that's Chinese medicine. And I was like, what? Okay. I said, well, I guess maybe I've got to go to China. And the girl said, I have a friend who is a traditional Chinese doctor who wants to teach an American Chinese medicine. I wonder if he would accept you as a student. I said, well, I'm all ears. I had no plan on where I wanted to go. I don't even really know where acupuncture came from in my mind. It just popped in. I said, I think that would be really cool to learn. So while in the course, she ended up talking to her friend, and he said, I'd like to do a FaceTime with this guy. Now, granted, he spoke no English. So we do a FaceTime with her as our translator. And he looks at me and he says, okay, I'll accept him as an apprentice, send him to China. I'm like, wow, I guess my next step is China.
Well, this is something you see on the movies, man. This is pretty cool. It's like you talk about Bruce Lee, and I absolutely love Bruce Lee. Martial arts, like you, has always been an attraction for me. And so when when you say something like this, being chosen by someone who doesn't even speak English in China to take you on as an apprentice, that is really cool. So at this, I mean,
Yeah.
you've got to be pretty pumped when you hear him say, let's go."
Yeah, I'm on another level right now. I've got the yoga school going on. I'm probably I mean, we're doing yoga 3 times a day, man. I'm probably in some of the best physical shape that I've been in my life. Um, I'm doing I'm getting ready to go to China. I've just been accepted as a Chinese apprentice. Yeah, I've got some I'm on another level right now.
Now, are you still communicating with your family back in the States, or are you telling them what's going on? Uh,
Yeah,
uh,
so I'm still back and forth every once in a while via FaceTime and stuff with my mom. Me and my mom's pretty close, even though it's a weird dynamic because even though I'm at this point understanding that my parents are, and look, my parents are like anybody's parents, whether you have deeper trauma than what I've been through or not. At the end of the day, we are all human beings floating around on a big something in the middle of a big something, trying to figure our existence out. So
sure.
at this point, I'm kind of giving them a pass on some of the traumas that I've obtained from them. And me and my mom have always had a pretty close relationship because through thick and thin, my mom, even when I was at my lowest and I was in, there was a part in time when I was really young where I was in trouble with the law and different things. Even through all of those times, my mom has only been, hey, I got you. You need to straighten up, but I'm here when you fall. And that's powerful because some people don't even have that, right? So I'm at least communicating back and forth with my mom. So she knows that I'm getting ready to take off to China. I just got to figure out visa and all that stuff. So my soon to be teacher had set up a timeline of when he wanted me to arrive in China. That gave me the remainder of my school and about 3 extra weeks to figure out visa and all that stuff to get into China. So, in the meantime, I graduated from the school. I say 3 weeks, but it might have been actually a little bit longer than that. Either way, I finished up the schooling and I moved in with the girl that I was seeing at her house for a little while. Now, she knew I was leaving, but she wasn't planning on leaving the island. So she's not planning on leaving, and I am planning on leaving. So, hey, we're going to hang out for this duration, and I'm getting ready to roll to China. So, I end up leaving the island. I stay about a week with her, and then I end up leaving the island and I'm going to go travel up North Thailand and then come back down to Bangkok. Bangkok's probably the easiest place to get my visa and all done. It's a big city. They have a big embassy. I go up all the way to North Thailand to a little place called Chiang Mai and spend a little time just traveling by train, checking out all the ancient ruins, little history travel. And then I come back down to Bangkok. Well, no, let me rephrase that. I'm in Chiang Mai. I'm in Chiang Mai, and there's a guy in my hostel who's from America. And now you have to understand, finding Americans traveling, here's another little eye opener, doesn't happen. We don't travel abroad because we've been taught you're going to die if you go over there. It's bad over here. They're gonna kill you if you go there. They're gonna eat you alive. You might end up with all your organs missing. I mean, it's all this scare, so you never leave outside of the box. I want you to know what's going on outside the box when you're from inside the box. So it's very seldom that you find an individual who is from America that's traveling abroad. So I'm talking to this guy, and he's like, yeah, I think I want to go here, check out this temple, and I want to go here. And all of a sudden, we kind of both had on our agenda to go to what's called the Tiger Kingdom. It's a place where you get to go into the cages with these big, massive animals and just kind of experience them firsthand. And I said, well, look, man, I know that I have to go down south soon, back to Bangkok and get my visa done. I said, how about tomorrow we jump on the scooter and head to go check out this temple? So he was like, oh man, that sounds great. So sure enough, first thing in the morning, we get on the scooters and we take off and we're going down to the Tiger Temple. I get off the scooter, I'm climbing up the steps. Now at this time, I didn't have an iPhone. That doesn't really, those things aren't really intelligent to have out there. It was when you're backpacking, it's easier to have these little phones that you can slip in these SIM cards from each different country or each different location. Buy one card, you go to the local location, you put a little money in the SIM card, and you can call whoever you want to call locally while you're traveling. I get a phone call. I look at the phone. I'm like, I don't even recognize this number. Answer the phone. Hello. And on the other end is the girl that I just left her house not long. And she says, Alex, I'm pregnant. And I'm just like, paya, floor. I'm like,
Wow.
okay, this is about to get quite interesting. How is this going to work out? I'm heading to China. I was like, pregnant. First answer. She's a party girl. I'm partying. We partying, having a good time. Is it for me? So I said, okay, listen, this is what's happening. I'm at this Tiger Kingdom. Tomorrow I'm gonna head down to the island. We'll have a conversation. We'll figure some things out, and we'll talk about it when I get down to the island. Now I gotta pass up Bangkok, go all the way down to the island, which is about 2 days travel. But it's what I got to do because I'm in the realms now mentally where one, I'm starting to really understand what it means to be a man. And now if this is mine, I have some responsibilities. No matter how it looks, I have to figure out what's going on and what does this actually mean and entail. So go into this Tiger Kingdom, check out these animals, leave Bangkok. Leave Chiang Mai, go down to Bangkok. Got to spend a night in Bangkok. Go down to South Thailand. Get on the island, and look, at the end of the day, she's not interested in leaving the island. I'm not interested. I was interested in, I'm getting out of here. She's probably angry. I'm angry. We get together and it is like World War III. She kicks me out the house. We're hollering, screaming, arguing. I get to one of her friends' little house and I'm like, man, what is going on? And basically it was like, well, welcome to the jungle, buddy. If it's yours, like you're in for it right now. So I said, okay. So I attempted to go and I calmed down, let some time calm down, attempted to approach her, more arguing, separate, calm down, attempt to get back together to talk, arguing. I said, you know what? I said, this is what I'm going to do. I'm not dealing with this. I said, I'm leaving this island and I'm going to China. When in 9 months, I'm coming back, I'm going to find out that kid's mine. Then I'll deal with it then. Because as of right now, I really don't know. I'm going to China. So I get to Bangkok, get all my visa done, take off, make it to China, and get ready for another culture shock of a lifetime. I get to the airport, give the guy the address, because all I have is an address now. Understand, I'm in a country and all I got is an address. I'm going on just pure D, like if this is meant to be, I'm gonna make it. And if it's not, this might be my end. We'll figure it out at that moment, right? So I give my address to this taxi cab driver and he takes off. And we're driving like it must have been about a 4-hour drive from the airport. And
Wow.
I'm like, holy shit. 4 hours. And the only thing that I know is I have not seen a single sign that I can read. That might be a problem.
What part of China is this?
This is Shenzhen.
Okay.
Now, maybe 4 hours, you know what? I don't know how far it was, but maybe with the traffic and everything, it felt like 4 hours. It might have been an hour. I don't even know. All I know is that I'm like not freaking out, but sitting here in a place of where I'm going, I don't know. I can't read anything. I don't speak this language. I know that I've been told that this is a communist country. They're going to kill me, harvest my freaking organs. I don't know what's going on, but I'm like, this might not end well for me. So once again, it's crazy. Taxi cab drivers in these other countries, man, they'll drop you off and point and expect you to know exactly what they're talking about. So he parks and he points and I get out and I'm like, oh, here we go. So I walk into this big building. Now, what I do know is I'm in a city and I'm looking for a clinic. Now, crazy is I never seen what Shenzhen looked like from any pictures. I didn't look it up. I didn't know. So in my crazy mixed up mind, I'm expecting little Chinese people walking with wooden shoes on dirt roads and with horses pulling carriage. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm thinking
Yeah.
like
Sure.
ancient China, right?
Right.
No, no, no. Shenzhen makes New York look like a baby. They got public transportation like you just would not believe. Everything is scan your car, blip, 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 blip. It is the most convenient and easy way to live that I've ever seen in my life. I don't really like it because I'm not a city person. I'm more of a like to be on the beach in a bungalow with my swimsuit all day long kind of person. But this is where I'm at. So I get into this big building and I'm standing in the lobby. There's nobody around. There's offices all around me. And there's this big itinerary of offices. And I'm sitting here looking at these names going, I'm in a bind. I have no idea where I'm at, where I'm going, and I can't read anything, and there ain't nobody around. Well, let's talk about divine intervention again. Out of probably all the damn country, there's this one girl that walks through the doors and goes, excuse me, you look like you're lost. And I went, holy shit, you speak English. Broken English, but English nonetheless.
Oh man.
Yeah. So either I've got at this moment, I'm like, either some higher power has got my back, or I've got a rabbit's foot shoved so far up my butt that I don't know where it's at. So I give this girl the address, and she says, oh, I know where that place is at. And she takes me right around the corner. I'm not even in the right location. Right around the corner, and I'm in this clinic. They tell my teacher that I'm here. I'm sitting down. They get me some tea. All these Chinese people are like, oh, look, they talking about me, American guy, da, 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 all this stuff, right? My teacher comes out and he's this tall, not super old, but definitely probably about 10 years older than me. and stern looking individual, big man. I didn't think Chinese people got big. He was a big guy. And he walks up to me and he looks at me. And I'm like, oh shit. This is already like feeling really weird. So, okay, that's it. That was our introduction. Shook my hand, or I don't even think he shook my hand. I don't even know, might have bowed or whatever. Um, told the girls or somebody to show me to my living quarters, and I set off to go find my bunk and all these different things. I spent the next 4 months following this guy around in clinic, learning everything I could from individuals who spoke no English. I did get lucky though, as he had a friend who was an extremely wealthy woman whose husband was this like political diplomat guy who she would come into the clinic to talk to him, and she spoke fairly good English. So she was going to be my translator.
Ah, okay.
But we want to take a break for a second. I know we're probably running on time, but we can take a break for a second.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me pause the recording and let's see. All right, we're back. All right, so where were we, man? So you had
In
a
China.
translator.
Yes. So I got a translator. So I'm attempting to piece together some of the things that he's teaching me while sitting in clinic. Now, understand, he wanted to teach a Chinese medicine to a medical profession. I was not a medical professional. I didn't have any medical training. So he was a little bit disappointed when I got there. So in the very first few days, even though he like brought me into some different clinical things, he didn't really like take me under his wing per se, right? Well, one day I was looking at my yoga books and I'm just going through stuff and writing things down. And he came and leaned over my shoulder and kind of took a look at what I was looking at. And then all of a sudden he just jetted. And he went to his office. He came out with a little bitty book. And that little book was a book about Kung Fu. Now, Kung Fu, not really the martial arts, but we'll utilize in the way we know as Kung Fu. What we noticed by looking at the book is that all the martial arts stands in this book were like almost similar. I mean, almost mimic the yoga poses, but in motion. So what he tried to explain to me was that it seemed like yoga might have originated in India, northern India, is what we kind of believe yoga originated some like 5,000 years ago or so. Probably migrated over into Tibet and came into China. And there's a chance that the Chinese might have said, I wonder if I could use this with movement as a self-defense posture. Either way, however it worked out, they were very, very similar in movement. At that moment, he understood that I knew about energy and meditation and what it took to be disciplined. So then it was on. He just basically grabbed me and brought me into every single treatment room and tried to teach me every single thing that he could. I mean, he really, really like went above and beyond to try to get me to understand this medicine. In that time frame, what I was witnessing really like I was in awe. I watched a gentleman come in, an older gentleman, probably like in his like 70s, maybe 80s. They rolled him in a wheelchair. He had rheumatoid arthritis. He could not move. He was basically like this in a wheelchair. And my teacher would sit with him and they drank tea. And I said, when it was over, I said, what? I said, he drank tea for like an hour. What was that? And my translator said, that was the intake. And I said, how do you do an intake by drinking tea? The way the Chinese do an intake is they look at your mannerisms. How is he favoring which side? How is he moving? How is he talking? How is this arm being needing in order to move, maybe compensating from the neck? It gave him a map of everything that was being pulled in different directions and where to start. So over the course of that 3, almost 4 month time, watching them soak his hands, use these wraps, use acupuncture in the hands, working, using massage therapy, all these different techniques to their disposal. When I left that clinic, I watched the same man that rode in the clinic in a wheelchair. They rolled him to the door in the wheelchair, and he kind of was like this, and he looked up and smiled and got up and started doing this. And I went, I
Wait,
never
he,
said nothing.
oh, wow.
This guy stood up and was dancing. He couldn't get out of a wheelchair because his legs and knees and ankles, everything was locked up and seizing up on him to the point where he was dancing.
Like with his
I
feet, like he stood up.
stood up and was like, yeah, and everybody was clapping, and I'm going, what am I witnessing here? I seen another woman come in who had dementia. She didn't know, well, she was not cognitive at all. The only thing she knew, according to my translator, was that the gentleman that was bringing her into the clinic was somebody that she was familiar with. She did not even know it was her son. She just knew that she was that guy right there is bringing me to a place. When I left, I watched them. My teacher stuck needles in his head, in her head, and her arms all over, and did all these different things. When I left, she not only knew who her son was, she knew who my teacher was. She knew why she was there. She knew she was coming to get therapy. She was 100% fully cognitive. And I went, my grandmother died of dementia because once you got it, you're done. I said, what am I witnessing here? So I was fortunate enough, the first modality in Chinese medicine is Chinese massage therapy, because the Chinese believe that massage therapy is the first modality you should learn, because you learn muscles, you learn how they pull, you learn energy, you learn how the energy gets stagnant in this area, how it affects this area. And you learn how to palpate the human body. Why is this area soft and weak? Why is this area hard and pronounced? All these different, why is this area hot? Why is this area cold? It gives you the ability to set out a map of something's going on. Chinese medicine is primarily based on circulation. Now, we can get into all the crazy philosophies of qi because, oh, qi is energy. Yeah, maybe not. Depends on how they talk about it. You can get into all these different 5-phase theories and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, Chinese medical understanding is primarily based on circulation. If you have an abundance of something here, and there's got to be a lack of something somewhere else. So let's take Jody's arm, for example. Jody came in with a tricep muscle that was primarily deflated. What I noticed was in his chest and his trap, in his left side of his body, was overly developed compared to the right side, and it was extremely hot. Well, when you have an overabundance of blood trapped in one area, you're going to get an overdeveloped puffiness. Think about, you go to the gym, get that pump, right? Where that pump's from? It's from blood being sent to that area. Okay, why is it hot? Because it's trapped. It can't go anywhere. So while I'm not saying that he doesn't have any kind of nerve problems in his neck, we haven't really fully discovered everything yet. What I am saying is just rectifying some of that circulation issue, the tricep is now coming back.
And what you're describing, so for the listeners out there, Jody Licatino, he's the founder of Thumos. He, Alex, he went to you, and he
Yes,
actually has credit.
that's how I met him. That's how we're talking now.
Yes, and he has actually credited you for getting his tricep back. I mean, like he had some nerve damage, and basically lost his tricep, and came to you, and he has actually told us that he credits you for getting his tricep back. So this is what led us to this podcast and kind of talking through it.
Yep.
And I'm still, I guess, from a standpoint of how this stuff works, and I'm sure the listeners are in the same boat. Like, uh, you talk about circulation, that makes a lot of sense. The examples you gave while you were in China, and these people like with dementia, and then um, the arthritis. What, like, as you were there witnessing what was going on, what have you come like? How would you explain that to somebody like myself who knows nothing about this stuff?
Man, I would say what essentially happened is from whatever the causation is, Chinese medicine doesn't care what the cause is. They don't really care if there's a bacteria in the body. What they care about is proper flow of the body. When you get this circulation to flow normally and naturally, whatever stopped the circulation, the body tends to become more harmonious and allows for the what we call the immune system, or in Chinese medicine, defense qi, to flow properly, and the body will take care of itself. But when you have these stagnations, that it leads some. If I have an overabundance here and there's a lack here, this area is now susceptible to something. It's weak. So because the Chinese say the lung system and the skin are paired, because the lungs breathe and the skin breathes, we say sometimes you need to get this to breathe. So I'll give you an example. My son came to the clinic the other day with a fever. Now, normally, most people would bring him to urgent care because he's got a fever. I knew that the fever was primarily, yep, it had some kind of bacteria, but it was a circulation issue that was trapped up in those upper extremities that needed to come down. It was trapped. It wasn't leaving the body. He wasn't sweating, but he was yet had this high fever. So all I essentially did was roll the skin, opening up the pores, allowing the pores to breathe, and shifting some of the different meridians, different points, and that's all philosophy and stuff. But working on some of these points that typically disperse heat, and within 20 minutes of me working on him, the heat was gone. He still felt bad. We got him on an herbal formula. 2 days, he was back. He was back to normal.
Hmm. Man, this is so counterintuitive to what we've been taught, and the way we handle things, with Western medicine. And so I guess the next question I would have for you is, what are the constraints that you have? Well, let's talk a little bit about what you have going on. You want to talk a little bit about your business, where you are
Yeah.
now, and maybe your location. Kind of put in a plug for Cajun Zen.
Yeah. I know we're running, we're getting on time. Um, Essentially, Cajun Zen is after some times of me coming back to the bayou. So let me just real quick give you the how I got back here. At some point after my son was born, I had left China, went back, checked on the baby. It was mine. Um, about 3 months after my son was born, his mother kind of was not mentally able or physically or whatever. She just checked out. And so I ended up being a single dad out in the middle of Thailand. So I flew back to the States with my little boy because I got family out here, and landed back in the States. I started teaching yoga. I did not think that I was going to be doing too much Chinese body work. I taught yoga in Homa for a while, and through the course of my little tincture there, ended up breaking down and going back to massage school. So went back to massage school, got credited to be able to put my hands on people and understand that acupuncture, herbal medicine, cupping, all of these things are tools that are an extension of Chinese body work. So essentially, my teacher taught me the very basis of the full medicine. It was broken. It was bits and pieces. I had a translator. He didn't speak English, so a lot of it was broken up. When after I got certified to teach to do massage work, I started working on people in Homa, and Hurricane Ida came and displaced me. So my son's mother she came back into his life after about 2.5 years. She lives in Mandeville. I ended up saying, hey, you know what? The best thing I could do is leave home area because I ain't got no work at all, and just sell my house. My house didn't get destroyed, more divine intervention, and move to Mandeville. So I come to Mandeville. I don't have work. I start contacting different companies to do massage work. Now I'm in the process of I'm certified to do Western style massage, but I'm attempting to do more of what my teacher taught me. So I put out feelers to like chiropractors, acupuncturists, all this. And it just so happened that the gentleman with green heron, who was one of the only acupuncturists in Mandeville, had just put a lease on a larger building, and he needed to rent out a room to somebody, but he didn't know who, because he didn't want to just rent it out to anybody who didn't live the same philosophy as him. Divine intervention. So I meet him, I work on him. He says, I don't know what it is where you got your training, because there's nobody doing what you do. So me and him paired up, and we've been here 3 years now. This is our 3rd year. And essentially what we're doing here is we have the majority of the modalities of Chinese medicine. He does acupuncture and herbal medicine. I do Chinese body work, and I also utilize my yoga training as rehabilitation. So between the 4 modalities, there's really not a whole lot that we can't treat here. Now I understand I use the word treatment because treatment in medicine seems to have gotten lost in some way. In order to treat a human being, you have to be able to sit with them and talk with them and understand how they're feeling and what they have going on. And you can't do that in a 5-minute conversation. So when you come to the clinic, I sit here for 30, 40 minutes. Sometimes it's almost an hour and a half that we're just talking, trying to figure out what it is that you have going on. Once I develop that strategy and know, after I palpate and feel and kind of check everything that's going on, what's pulling, what's here, it gives me an indication about where I can start my treatment processes. Then we have the full array of this clinic. We have acupuncture. Hey, I know enough now because thanks to him, my business associate, he's pieced a bunch of the pieces together that my teacher was trying to teach me that I couldn't understand because I didn't understand the philosophy and the language. So he was able to piece a bunch of that stuff together. And now I have a much more detailed understanding about what I'm looking for. And so we have the ability to send patients to whatever in this clinic. And we've been fairly successful with treating a lot of different things that most people have come and said, hey, you're my last resort. They want to cut on me, and I'm not really interested. I am not saying we don't need modern medicine. We don't do surgery. Surgery is an amazing thing. We need surgery. But if it's not the first thing that should be looked at, because you never should go to the most invasive of all the treatment strategies first. And we do that here. Oh, you have, I had a lady came in, I have knee pain. I went to the doctor. They want to cut on me. And she was only like 40 years old, 42 years old. Oh, excuse me, 42 years old. And she's like, man, the first time I had knee pain, you want to cut? She's like, I got to get a second opinion. She Googled, found me, came in. She had muscle tension that needed to be worked out in the quadricep to loosen up the tension on the knee. Now she's back to playing tennis. Think the individual is not happy. She doesn't have to go make surgery to get a knee replacement. Not everybody is as extreme as that. Not everybody gets those miraculous patterns, but sometimes they do. Jody's another one. Hey, look, I'm giving you a handful of time to see if you can get this tricep back. If not, I'm going to get my neck cut on. I'd rather not get my neck cut on because at the end of the day, I worked offshore. I know that on a crane, that wire rope, if you have one little bitty cut of one braid, we unspool the whole crane because now the integrity is gone. What happens when you cut on the human muscle tissue? The integrity is now gone. I don't care how good the human body will heal itself. The integrity of the muscle tissue will never be the same once it has been cut. So, although I do need modern medicine, it shouldn't be the first go-to. We should go through everything.
That makes a lot of sense. What would you say is the most common symptom that you see? Is there a common symptom that you see
Migraine.
coming?
Migraines. 30 years of migraines. It takes a little while. We typically clear those up. We do what's called, we deal with something called the sand jiao, or in Chinese, in American Chinese medicine, it's called the triple warm. Meaning this is a burner. This area's got to be hot. Then you have a middle area that needs to be hot. And then you have a lower burner. That lower area needs to be hot. Anytime those areas are shifted and fluxed and have heat going in these different directions, sometimes people come in, they got cold hands, cold feet. Well, I've always got cold hands and cold feet. That's not normal. And whoever tells you it's normal is out their mind. You're a warm-blooded creature. You should have good, nice, warm-blooded circulation going to every part of your warm-blooded body. And over a chronic period of time, lack of circulation in the feet will cause something. Typically, it causes stagnation and swelling. Just like a river. If you pour water down in a river and you dam it up, the river's not going to flow anymore. It's gone. It's stuck. It's going to stagnate. It's going to get there. It'll become a bog or a swamp. So if you don't have the circulation that flows into the foot and out of the foot, well, there goes your circulation problem. Now it's going to retain water, swelling. We got to figure out why it's not circulating through. Migraines, typically it's because there's a circulation problem done with the middle burner. It's tight. For some reason, the organs have gotten locked up and tightened up. We need to fix the connective tissues on the organs. That we see a lot of that.
So it sounds to me, based on what you're describing, it sounds like our bodies have an incredible healing capacity.
Mm-hmm.
We actually can heal various symptoms that we think are something that we have a disease or whatever it might be. And what you're saying is that you are trying to free up your body to allow it to heal itself. Is that? Does
Four
that?
different bacteria present with the same type of fever indication, we're not going to combat the bacteria. We're going to combat the indications, because we can treat those indications. We know that if there's a fever, typically these areas get soft. Certain pressure points become soft and weak. Well, we treat those soft, weak areas, and all of a sudden, miraculously, they become more robust and the body heals itself.
That is so cool. Man, that is cool. And the
But
fact that you're doing it for 3 years here in Louisiana is even cooler. That is really neat, man.
one of the biggest things, though, is you have to understand it takes time to train these to become indicators. They are trained to typically find temperature shifts. They are trained. I can usually go to a person, and just by the density or laxity of the skin or the heat coming off of it, I can say, here's your pain. And once I push on it, they go, oh my God, that's where it hurts. Yeah,
Mm,
because they're sensitive. They actually used to teach this massage technique to the blind,
mm.
who better to see with, they see with their hands all the time.
Oh, wow. Man. So
So a lot
so
of good.
well, I was just thinking the what you learned in China with your teacher who, obviously had a language barrier. That combined with what you're doing now, is there a continual learning for you? As you
So
go through.
there's the answer, right? The technique is easy. Oh, all of a sudden, we got a rubbing technique, or we got a combing technique. You can learn those techniques super easy. When to use them, why to use them, and how to use them properly will take me a lifetime of studies. I will be studying this medicine until the day I close my eyes. Because the Chinese have a saying, Ren Shi, Ren Shu. It's on my website. Benevolent heart, benevolent skill. I've changed who I was, found my purpose in life, and now am aimed towards learning a benevolent skill through my heart in order to help others. Period. End of discussion.
Ooh, that's
A
a mic drop
Chinese,
statement.
a Chinese doctor, a legitimate, true Chinese doctor, does not treat people until he doesn't want to or until he retires. He treats people, he or she, until they close their eyes.
Mm, that's beautiful, man. Did do you feel like as you treat more people, you're becoming aware of more uh, traits or skills or learning by each individual that you treat? Are you like, do you feel yourself growing with each
Oh,
individual?
the more I read all these books, the more I study. And you see, interesting enough, this is a small little library. I don't need any more than this, because these books have all the information. You just get better and more efficient at utilizing the information over the course of your lifetime. Some of these old Chinese practitioners, they could touch you for 15 minutes, be done. I got to touch you for an hour. That's different.
Do you ever see yourself reconnecting with your teacher in China?
I would love to. I pretty much, outside of some more of that divine intervention, doubt if that's even possible. China's a big place. We've lost contact. I don't have his contact information. And I think I have one phone number to my translator, and I don't even know if it works. So it's part of the journey. We learn. He was the catalyst to get me involved in this understanding. Um, my business associate was the individual that helped piece everything together. Now it is about me embedding myself in the reading, in the studying, and just being a part of this world.
So before we wrap up, man, where can people find you?
I'm in Mandeville, Louisiana, right by the causeway in Mariners Plaza at 300 Mariners Plaza, Suite 305. You can check out the website at Cajun Zen. I just finished up a commercial that's now on the cover of the website, first page. You can kind of take a look at the commercial and kind of get an idea of who I am and what we're attempting to do and just kind of get a feel for it. And then it's about just getting in here and seeing if there's something that we can help you with. Like I said, we Chinese medicine works on time, which is one of the biggest issues that we run into in this medicine. Is that depending on what the therapy is going to depend on how long we need to see you for. Ideally, I like to see people twice a week. That's when you're like in a boxing match, and I want to be the victor because it's not you against your whatever you're dealing with. It's me against it until I train you to take over, train your body to take over. Then it becomes you against it. So twice a week is ideally for me. But some people, monies may not be there, or for whatever reason, scheduling may not be there. So we do the best that we can. But you can find me on the website, go through the portal, and set up an appointment. First initial intake is an hour and a half, and that's typically me talking, getting to know you, getting to know all the symptoms, getting to know all the things that you have going on, and then palpating, trying to figure out what the body is. There's not a lot of treatment, if any, that even goes in the first session. But then once we schedule the second session and you come in, I usually have a better understanding about how I want to approach things.
All right, excellent. Well, Alex, thank you so much for your time today, and thank you for sharing the details of your story. What an incredible story that you have, and we're blessed to have you in Louisiana, man. Back here, treating people in the in the local area. And I don't know where your life's going to go from here because it sounds like you're not too fearful of moving and packing up and going
I
into.
go where the universe tells me.
Oh,
Um,
that's
right now we're here and we're trying to just build something here to help as many as I can and learn as much as I can. And if that keeps me here forever, then hey, so be it. And if it moves me, then it'll be that too.
All right. Well, thanks, Alex. And thanks, everyone, for listening today. If you like what you've heard, be sure to check us out at thumosusa.com. Also, Thumos School for Men on social media. So, with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Alex, thank you so much, man. We'll
Thank
see
you.
you next time,
Appreciate it.
bud. All right. Thanks, everybody.